Welcome into Training Camp Report presented by Advent Health. Casey Phillips here with senior writer and editor Scott Smith. And man, we have some exciting news.
We have big smiles on our faces.
Big smiles on our faces to start. We had a whole plan of how we were going to start this show. We had it all mapped out. And then amazingly, right before we were about to start shooting this, we got word Tristan Wirfs has agreed to terms. There's the big man right there. And I mean, I cannot imagine a Bucs fan out there that isn't jumping for joy at the sound of that news at this point. What is your reaction to knowing that this now is getting done and we know Tristan Wirfs staying a Buc?
Well, relief, and everybody thought this was going to get done, but the longer it dragged on, the longer Tristan wasn't taking part in the full team drills, and he himself said these are important reps to get right now as the offensive line and the offense as a whole gains continuity and chemistry while they're trying to install this new system. So I'm sure he's relieved as well. Some of the details, Bucs don't really announce salary figures, but it's a 5-year extension. So he already has this year covered, and it's a 5-year extension that runs through the 2029 season.
Wow.
When he'll still be one of the best tackles in the game by then, easily. And it makes him, it is confirmed that it makes him the highest paid tackle in the NFL, which means the highest paid tackle ever in the NFL, and the highest paid player in Buccaneers history. So the Bucs now have two of the highest paid players at their position with him and Antoine Winfield, and that's kind of amazing on one team, right?
And from one draft.
That's right.
That to
the first
me,
2 picks in that draft.
The first 2 picks
What
in
a
that
home
draft.
run.
I can't imagine that there are many better top picks in those drafts. And what a year to do it in 2020 where things were so chaotic, and for Jason Light and the rest of his team to nail it so well, not only on the field but off the field, that they're both just such solid guys, great contributors to this team, the best at their position in the league. And I know also, again, for Tristan, as you see him now, they're in pads today, again, putting on the helmet because they had the last day off. And, he had been participating. He didn't really ever do the hold in like some guys have done, but he wasn't going fully in some of the team contact periods for obvious reasons of just trying to make sure he stayed healthy. And now I'm sure that, again, as you brought up of the continuity and you're learning, Liam Cohen's offense and you're trying to get all the chemistry, and, he's the guy over on the left side where you're trying to build that chemistry with whoever that left guard position is going to be. Every rep and snap he can be out there is going to be really important, I have to imagine.
Yeah, he definitely feels that way himself, and it feels like this was the final piece of the puzzle for this offseason. I think when this offseason began, I'm pretty sure there was a checklist back there around Jason Light's area, and it had Mike Evans, Baker Mayfield, Antoine Winfield Jr., Levante David, Chase McLaughlin, all needed new contracts, and then Tristan Wirfs, obviously still under contract, but needed a new one for the future. And it's not the fact that Tristan is the last one of those done isn't any kind of priority ranking of those 6 things. It's just that those other guys actually didn't have contracts for 2024, so they needed to get done first, and then they needed to get that deal done with Antoine after he got the franchise tag. So then they really dived in earnest on Tristan, and he said a few days ago that the process has been good the whole time. There's no bad blood between him and anybody in the front office or any of his teammates. Everybody was feeling good, just had to hammer through some things, and apparently they got it done. So 5 years, that's nice. And
I think didn't Jason Light say something along the lines of that we'd basically need another boat parade if he was able to get all this done, and I think this was the last piece.
Gas up the boats.
Yeah, everyone go get in your boat and do a little honorary lap in honor of Jason Light today. So that was the news that we received right before practice started this morning, and we just all could not be happier for Tristan and his family, for the Bucs organization. Just a great guy, great player, and we are all so excited he's remaining here, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit later on the show as well, because we're going to have Rick Stroud join us in the second segment. So for now, let's get into what we were originally planning on discussing.
Yeah, well, I mean,
there's
a kind of a connected one, because you talked about how he needed to build chemistry with whoever's that left tackle. Well, I mean, left guard. Mm-hmm. It looks like that's not going to be Sua Opeta. You saw him on Tuesday night injure his knee in practice, in the night practice, and they took him in. The Bucs haven't officially said anything as of our shooting right here, but there are reports that he tore his ACL, which means he would be out for the season. So that was one of the prime candidates for that spot, along with Ben Bredesen and maybe Robert Hainsey, maybe Elijah Klein. So it's going to mean some more opportunities for some other guys, but that's unfortunate for him.
Yeah, we are very sad to hear that if that ends up being the case, as those reports have said. We are very sad for him, and it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. And I mean, Ben Bredesen seemed like he had already been taking a little bit more of the starting reps.
For sure.
So there's at least that to be said. But no Sua Opeta, so it's going to be even more interesting. Another wrench thrown into that left guard position. And as you mentioned, that practice was indoors, which it's basically the one pre-planned indoor practice of training camp. Otherwise, it's indoor if there's lightning or other conditions and stuff. And so it was, a great, it's a great atmosphere every time. There's always a great crowd and breaks up the morning monotony a little bit, evening practice, all of that. What were some of the other things that you noticed from that practice?
The fun thing is there was lightning at that time. It was pre-planned,
but
there was lightning going on. Coach Bowles said afterwards that it was nice to break up sort of the routine of training camp because it ends up being sort of Groundhog Day, you're doing the same thing every day, 3 days in a row, and then an off day, but it's always 8:30 in the morning. It's usually about 2 hours long. It's hot. It's sweaty. So I think he liked it for that reason. And otherwise, it seemed like a pretty sharp practice. One notable thing was Mike Evans and Levante David got off days, and then so did Chris. And Mike and Levante are basically, I think, getting every third practice off, just part of how they're doing it. But Chris, a coach said that had to do with the fact that it was a practice on turf. So with Chris and Mike out, that meant even more snaps for guys like Jalen McMillan, and Jalen McMillan put on another show, man. I mean, just keeps doing it. We said it at I think maybe the very first show when we were talking about receivers, that what coaches always say is, there's a lot of practices, and one guy's going to have a big day, and one guy's going to have a big catch and show up and flash here. But the guys, what they want to see when they're choosing at the end, the roster and the practice squad, is who shows up every day, who's doing it consistently day after day. And Jalen McMillan is doing that. And Coach Bowles has said on multiple occasions what a great camp that rookie's having.
I think we've got his highlight of one of his touchdowns here for you, right there in the indoor.
That was at the end of that was a red zone drill, and the defense had broken up 2 more plays. I'm pretty sure they were calling that third down, and it was just kind of an out route, as you saw, and the quarterback scrambled to his left a little bit and just threw him a dart.
Yeah.
I think it was Kyle on that.
Yeah, throw. It's just been amazing to watch him. I'm really excited, and I think it's also amazing because he's from Washington, and this heat and humidity.
He's handling it well.
He's handling it well, so it's great to see. And I'm really excited to see what he could potentially offer. And we always like to give the disclaimer that that you never know until it's more game-like scenarios and all of that. And now we're getting the pads on a little bit more, but it's definitely, there's been nothing you don't want to see happening. It's just been as encouraging as it can be.
And the first football game of the year is tonight, right?
Yeah.
And then our first one will be next week. And when we start talking about which players are we really going to be keeping an eye on in that game, Jalen's surely going to be one of them.
Yeah, and I know that there was also a nice play made by Rakim Jarrett. And so as much as Jalen McMillan's been getting a lot of attention, there are some other wide receivers vying for that number 3 spot and to fill out the rest of that wide receiver roster. So what are some of the other guys showing you?
The Bucs really liked Rock last year, and he came in as an undrafted free agent out of Maryland, I think, and made the team. And, it's hard for the 5th receiver on a team to get a ton of action, but he made some nice plays. And then he ran into a little bit of an injury issue in the second half, so didn't get to play a lot down the stretch. But I know they're still very high on him. I hadn't remembered saying his name a whole lot during this camp, but that doesn't mean he isn't doing well. But he made a really nice back of the end zone catch in that inside practice. And, he's definitely a top candidate to make the roster.
All right, well, we are going to take a quick break, and after that, we are going to have Rick Stroud come on for us here with the Tampa Bay Times, and then we'll be back with the third segment as well, so stick with us.
52 other guys are counting on me when I'm out there, on the field and off the field, just be a leader.
Let's go. Bring it in.
Bring that energy, man. Be the standard today, man. Let's bring it.
We got a call to do it. We are showing it. You see the evidence. Yeah, you see the
blitzer. He fumbles the ball. Blitzing. Linebacker Levante David.
Mr. Steady, Levante David.
The pass is batted with. It's picked off. Intercepted by Levante David. Touchdown Tampa Bay.
Then I'm doing it to death.
David. Wow. Came out of nowhere.
He's playing lights out. He's a very unquestioned leader on this team.
We want the legacy.
Tampa legend. Worldwide legend. 15 minutes of excellence.
If I do it, I'ma do it for the.
Don't let up. Don't let up. Don't let up.
Levante David. Levante David is all over it.
Welcome back into Training Camp Report presented by Advent Health. Casey Phillips here with Rick Stroud of the Tampa Bay Times. We'd already asked you to come on before we knew what would happen.
Right.
And boy, I feel like we picked great timing. I'm sure for you, you're probably a little busy right now, so maybe not the greatest timing for you. So we appreciate you still coming on here. But excited to hear your thoughts. I mean, I know you've been following this contract situation the whole time.
Yeah.
And I would love to hear your reaction when you heard that they'd agreed to terms and what this would look like and what it means to this team.
Well, it's great news. I mean, if there's ever a player, right, that you want to reward, it's a guy like Tristan Wirfs, who's not only, I think, the best left tackle in football, but maybe one of the best humans they've had on this team. And that's saying something. I've done this for a while. To make a guy the highest paid anything, we saw that with Antoine Winfield Jr. earlier this year. Now you have the highest paid offensive lineman in NFL history, the biggest contract the Bucs have ever given out. It's more than $140 million over 5 years. This is big news. And if you just kind of look at the offseason this team has had, and Tristan was a guy that was under contract in a fifth-year option, but to bring back a Mike Evans, to bring back Baker Mayfield, right, Levante David, you franchise Antoine Winfield and then make him the highest paid player at the defensive back position, not just safety. That's a lot of work and a lot of money for the Glazers and a lot of commitment, but they're giving it to the right guys, highly productive players, but better than that, some of the best humans on the team. So I'm happy for Tristan. I think everybody will be. And you've got your left tackle for the next 5 years.
Yeah, which, I mean, man, I'm sure everyone on the team, fans, everyone is like, heck yeah, that's a position you want to feel good about. So speaking of the offensive line, I know that's been a storyline that's been interesting. We got the rookie coming in potentially at center, and then the left guard position, one of the few starting positions that's kind of up for grabs at this point. So what have you been seeing and watching with that offensive line as a whole?
Well, it's a shame, Sua Opeta is out now for the year with a torn ACL, and he was competing at that left guard position, but Ben Bredesen has done a good job there so far. And really, it all starts with Graham Barton, right? I mean, that's their first-round pick. You want to get a guy like that at center to have that relationship with Baker Mayfield. There's a big learning curve, but I hear that Duke's a pretty good academic school, so he probably won't have any too much trouble there. And he's just so athletic. And to get some size in front of Baker, who did a lot of movement out of the pocket last year and also helped the running game. I mean, it's no secret this team has been, the last in rushing the football the last couple of years. So they wanted to be better there. So I think like I said, they've had a really good draft. It starts with your first pick. Seems like if you get that one right, the rest of them kind of fall into place. And I like what they've done. And in having Tristan, anchored up now, he can go work with his guys and have full contact and not worry about the money and all that stuff. So it's a much improved unit, but they got a new offense under Liam Cohen, and they still have a long way to go.
Yeah, and speaking of that, what are the things that you've been wanting to know or learn more about what he said? I mean, we know we'd interviewed him in the offseason, he'd given away a few things, but now that you've been able to watch several days of camp, what do you think a Liam Cohen offense is going to look like?
Well, I mean, there'll be some similarities. They run a lot of outside zone scheme, but I think the difference is, as my good friend Tom Moore says, it's about giving the quarterback and the offense answers, right? Dave Canales did a nice job here. It was his first year of calling plays. But I think the difference is going to be that Baker Mayfield is going to be able to get them into better plays, right? When you see certain fronts in the run game, you're going to be able to get them out of that. And so a lot of motion, what the defense is called eye candy. This defense is pretty good, and they'll have a call-it period where they don't know what's coming. It's not scripted. And they've mentioned how difficult it is to sort of know what play they're running. And so they can run the same play out of 15 different formations as opposed to 15 plays out of one formation. So I think more multiple, and that means a learning curve, but it also means an opportunity to be more successful.
And as you get closer to some of these preseason games, training camp can get a little Groundhog Day out here, and there's only so many things you can tell from what's happening at these practices. Yeah. What are you going to be watching for specifically in the preseason games for some of those last storylines of whether it's starting roles, whether it's filling out the roster? What's going to grab your eye in those games?
Well, we know that preseason is different now, right? You don't want to submit your starters to a lot of action. You don't want them to play very much, and so that means playing your rookies, and I think they have an outstanding rookie class. I think Tyke Smith has been a guy that's come in here and played like a 5 or 6 year veteran. He has a high football IQ. Jalen McMillan has just been a star every day. I know you guys have talked about him a lot. So you want to see how they adapt. Look, most of these guys came from big programs and winning programs, which is the advantage this year. You don't always get that in the draft. But there's still something about going out there with the lights on and how you perform when you're under pressure and it's full speed. And there's practice speed where you really don't hit anybody and you kind of just thump. And then there's preseason speed, and eventually you get to the regular season speed, which is even faster. So really just how much the guys retain. Do they make mental mistakes? You want to reduce that. But yeah, I want to see the Chris Braswells, and I want to see some of those new elements, the Bucky Irvings, and what they can do. Also look at the new kickoff rules that they have and how they're going to navigate that. So it has its purpose. I think the joint practices are more valuable to the veterans, but games are games, and you want to see how they perform.
And what stands out to you about this defensive front and some of the changes with that this year, of where you don't have Shaq Barrett anymore, that's been such a stalwart of this group? And if you'd said a year or two ago that, Yaya Diaby's your most seasoned, known quantity out there in terms of knowing this is the guy, the starter, it's just been such an interesting thing to watch, and seeing Kalijah Cansey year 1 to year 2. When you look at kind of that front group, what really stands out to you?
Yeah, when you think back to the Super Bowl, and it was Jason Pierre-Paul and Shaq Barrett, right? And both those guys are gone now. Listen, I think that football begins up front, and they have two young future stars, I think, and that's Kalijah Cansey and Yaya Diaby. And those guys seem to be joined at the hip, not just on the field, but sort of off of it as well. And we didn't get to see Kalijah early in the year because he had the injury, calf injury early in the season. He started the first game, re-injured it, and really it wasn't until about halfway through the year he got to play, and he was phenomenal. He had a ton of tackles for losses. I think he was the defensive rookie of the month in November. And Yaya Diaby has gotten even bigger, if that's possible. Like, you look at his arms, and
he's a beast.
He's enormous. But he's also a guy that this matters to him. And I think what surprised them a little bit is just how well he rushes the passer. I don't think they knew that they had a guy that in really half a season could get them 7.5 sacks. He's looking for 10. He'll probably get that and more. But high motor guys that want to be great, very serious about football, and just really athletic. And then this is the last chance for Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, who's in a contract year. They didn't give him the 5th-year option, but you bring in a Chris Braswell to help him. And then, of course, Vita Vea, who showed up in the best shape of anybody. When you have that guy in the middle that can forklift 1 or 2 guards or centers into the backfield, that helps everybody. So I think they're really good up front. They got to stay healthy. They're not that deep. But they've done a nice job of adding youth, and it's that second year that you get really better.
Yep, I agree. Well, Rick, thank you so much for coming on with us, and good luck the rest of the day covering all this Tristan Wirfs news. We appreciate it as always. And again, we have one more segment coming up, so stay with us.
Antoine Winfield Jr.
Antoine Winfield Jr.
He's definitely taking that defense to the next level.
By any means, pressure's coming. Cousins is dead. The ball is out, and the Buccaneers have it. Antoine Winfield Jr.
Second to none, I am primary, not secondary.
Yes, Winfield again.
I'm about to make the ground shake. Yeah, this is
football right here.
Causes fumbles at an enormous rate. He makes tackles behind the line of scrimmage. He's a complete player.
Not a conspiracy, come with that big bang theory.
Knocked away, and on the deflection, it's intercepted. That is Winfield. Deep down the field. For Pittman, and it's intercepted by Winfield.
That boy 6'5", how you do that? I don't know.
Winfield caught it.
Wild play from Winfield. Antoine Winfield is everywhere today.
I know you feel it.
Welcome back into Training Camp Report presented by Advent Health. Casey Phillips here with senior writer and editor Scott Smith. We just had Rick Stroud on from the Tampa Bay Times. Really appreciate him taking the time out to talk to us when it is a definitely hectic morning for all the reporters out there covering this big old Tristan Wirfs news that we are very excited about. So
I heard him saying good things about Yaya, and that was something we had intended to talk about, but it sort of ran out of time.
Yeah, ran out of time. So I'm sure we'll probably bring it up tomorrow and many other days. I'm sure Yaya's going to give us plenty of reasons to talk about him.
I just laugh when I think of Tristan Wirfs. He was talking about guys coming back, and then he said, Yaya, my God, that guy has been working out, obviously.
He really has. He's been here, I think, most, if not all, of the offseason. Felt like every time I was around the hallways, I was seeing him coming out of the weight room, coming out of whatever.
Didn't think he needed to get bigger and stronger, but hey, we'll take it.
Yeah, I felt like he was just fine, but yeah, you're never going to be upset about that. So, all right, in our final segment here, what we've been doing each day is picking a different position group and breaking down the whole thing of not just who might be the starters, but who we think might make the roster, everyone vying for all those different positions. So today we are going to talk about tight ends, and I feel like this is an interesting group that maybe we haven't given a ton of attention to yet, haven't talked about as much, but they're a very interesting group. They are so young, and you have a new position coach for them as well, and Kate Otten just did all the things last year, and it'll be interesting. Do you see him doing all the things again this year, or how do you see that shaking out now that it is a new offensive scheme as well?
Yeah, it could go either way because, he just does everything right. And so I think, so last year he played 96.5% of the snaps, which is literally unheard of for tight ends. I think there were 3 different games where he played every single snap, and I've said it before, I only found one game by any tight end over the last 20 years in Bucs history that did that. So it's a little unusual, but on the other hand, he just consistently does everything right. So when you're choosing which tight end do we want out there, the coaches are always like, well, we know Cade's going to do this, and he's going to do this, and he's going to do this. So he's been in the mid-40s in his reception totals the first 2 years. Maybe he can get over 50. But as we've said, if Liam Cohen's offense looks at all like what the Rams did, and we sure think there's going to be a lot of influences from that, they do mostly 11 personnel, 3 receivers, so they don't do a lot of 2 tight end sets, and so that would mean it's harder to get snaps for the tight ends. That being said, I have seen them do some 2 tight end stuff out here, so maybe it won't be exactly like what they did with the Rams.
All right, and so if that is the case of maybe he's not going to do quite as much, what do you feel like it means in terms of the other guys that would be out there spelling him a little bit?
Right.
What types of tight ends are we going more for the pass catching, the blocking? I mean, I always want both, but what are the big emphasis you think are going to be in terms of who gets to be out there in addition to Cade?
Well, it's interesting because in addition to Cade, in the last 3 years, the Buccaneers have spent 4 day 3 draft picks on tight ends, because the same year that we drafted Cade, we drafted Kieft, mainly because he's such a good and willing blocker, and he loves doing that. Last year he had 1 catch. It was a touchdown, but he only had 1 catch, played about 15% of the snaps. And then Payne Durham last year in the 5th round, he had 5 catches last year, didn't get a ton of playing time, but Coach Bowles has said on more than one occasion during this camp that he thinks they're going to get more production out of Payne this year, which would suggest he's going to get more playing time. And then this year, a 7th round pick on Devin Culp, who is a different sort of skill set. And we talked about the first day that he's bigger than we expected because of his, the scouting report on him is how fast he was and how good he is after the catch. So I guess his size helps him with that too. A good size speed combination that could help on special teams as well. And then you got a couple other guys, David Wells, Tanner Taula, Sal Cannella, the most recent addition. Those are all guys that came in the league as undrafted free agents.
Yeah, and I feel like this is just such an interesting group, and to see, I mean, Cade has just done everything asked of him, and I think it's so great, and he's been so mature, but again, he's also had to lead the room as a second-year guy, in the years past. So I feel like it's such an interesting group to be as young as they are, and they have that new position coach who's played it and he's coached it for a long time, and I feel like that's going to be a really big boost to all of them as well. And I do feel like just seeing again the way that you're wanting to boost the run game so much that you do end up needing some of these guys that are good and willing blockers in addition to trying to be that safety blanket for Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, and they have to block Yaya sometimes.
Yeah, no thank you.
We were just talking
I'm like,
about that.
hard pass on that. I would not want to be a part of that.
Yeah, of those, David Wells has been around here for a little while. Tanner Taller right now is on NFI due to a leg injury. And then the most recent addition, Sal Cannella, is a guy that was playing at community college but really felt like he deserved to be in D1. So he just kept sending emails to coaches. And apparently the Auburn tight end coach, it was about the 3rd or 4th time he sent him an email where he finally decided to read it. And he got in there.
That's great.
And
I love
played at a high
that.
level.
That's awesome. All right, well, that is going to do it for us on this edition of Training Camp Report presented by Advent Health. Again, we will be back here the next 2 days in a row. We have practices in the morning, so we'll be back to cover those. We'll see you then.